that, I don't think that question has come up prior to tonight, so I'm not sure if there's an answer to it. I mean, my sense is that it would all be available. That parts of that same assessment.
Is there a form or a way set up already for the community to contact the community, voice their opinions?
I don't know that it has happened yet, but that would make sense. And I don't know that an email address or box for the school district office or social media approach. I'm not sure.
I envisioned possibly a survey available online that we could solicit community input from. And I'm not sure if the school district has access to the survey engine that we could use.
I took the time to read the facilities manual. I was just talking to, I assume you're going to talk to us about that tonight? And maybe you have two, and it has a series of steps. I forgot how many, but about 8 or 9, all the specifications. And I'm wondering if that could divide us into committees, if that's a suggestion. I'm wondering about process. We have an agenda, we have, the end result, the product. We're thinking about that, but it's in between in the structure of the committees, and there's an awful lot in there. Just leading up to a schematic that we would have to understand to make a balance or make a decision between a new school or a renovation or modernization as the policy, the OSPI policy reads. So I'm wondering if, when we're through listening to Gary, that perhaps we could come up with committee structures or things to discuss or find out to report to the committee as a group, if that can be processed. It's just a thought.
So using the OSPI's facilities manual for subcommittee structure and a breakdown of tasks between different groupings within the committee.
Yeah, it's the professor and me. There's a lot of homework there. It's pretty long, but I think it's well worth reading if you haven't. You can download it off of the OSPI. I think in fact, I think it's pretty important. Oh, good.
Well, with the homework, are the future meetings already determined, like the date for the future meeting, so we know when? Because June 15th is rapidly approaching, and the charge has an awful lot of things that I know I myself am completely ignorant of. So if we had a date where we knew specifically what we were talking about at each meeting, as well as what we needed to study in order to be prepared for that meeting, that would be, at least for me, extremely helpful.
I had heard a proposed schedule that would be every 2 weeks, the first and third Wednesdays.
That's proposed.
Proposed.
That's where we do have another meeting May 2nd, in which we have invited ALSC and Costetti architects to present.
But again, I think the committee members would need to kind of say that kind of schedule does work or doesn't work. It is hard with, I think, 60 or 70 people to find days and time that work. Yes.
That prompts the question I intended to ask all along, which is on days where perhaps a member of this committee cannot attend, is it reasonable or to send a proxy? That may, I would assume that such a suggestion would have to be approved in some way and not just, my best friend.
Are you going to miss one?
Wednesday.
Well, I think you could get information from us.
No, that's true, but
Text is your response.
We'll probably develop an operating procedure that might be set by us.
which is fair, I'm just asking.
What else? Anything else?
Part of the reason I ask is usually when I miss a meeting, I put in charges. Part of it.
It probably would be helpful also to have a clear start time and a clear stop time. Otherwise, these can tend to go fairly long. Yeah. And if we had something that, just kind of helped keep us on track, that would be good.
When we follow Robert's rules, for example, something that goes with that.
Also, something that's worked fairly well recently is starting out with time limits assigned to the agenda items, which you can always vote to extend. It's just a prescription, it doesn't have to follow, but it does provide a little bit of comfort.
So are there any things that you want to tackle now, or do you want to wait till after presentation by OSBI?
If it hasn't already been said, the interim between this is a given, but the interim between the meetings, every 2 weeks, we make sure that we have committees established, if we can tonight, or definitely by the next time, so that if we're committee 2, 3, or 4, whatever it is, we have time to deliberate in between, so we know ahead of time what we're going to do. That makes for a lot of extra time to do things, but at least there's a goal. We have a report at the next meeting.
Okay, so hopefully by the end of tonight, there'll be a decision made on whether it be a subcommittee structure, and what format that will follow, whether it will be based on the facilities manual or OSBI, and then what the kind of charge of those subcommittees is in between meetings of the full committee. Any other questions in the committee's mind about these things, and we can revisit the presentation? Sound good? Okay. So again, tonight's presentation will be by Gary Miller, who does facilities planning in the Eastern District of Washington State for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And he's been invited here today to talk about the elements of school planning that are kind of around statewide kind of standards and expectations. So do you want to use the podium or just the mic? Or?
I was kind of wondering about.
Okay. So if you have people come out here when Mr. Miller is presenting, if you can maybe hold your hand to your ear so he can speak up or know that he needs to do something.
First of all, I don't exactly think this is the Bible that Jim might be referring to it is. This is basically the guide that the school district goes through to reach or to achieve state construction assistance on a project. And it does outline ways that a district can go through basically a due diligence process in planning. The decisions that you make, they're all local. This is all local decision making. We support it. The rules that we follow are primarily to lead you to what is a good decision for your community. No value judgments on behalf of whether you put a new building or modern homewood. Makes no difference. And maybe I should move the mic. Everybody can hear me. I think with that internet I have discussion broken. Paul, you asked me to cover a couple of topics in particular. I didn't do a good job of making notes as to what I was going to cover, but I've been doing this job for about 20 years, so I think that there's probably not a question that I can't really feel off the top of my head, even though there's no hair left on it.
You might need to move the mic a little closer.
Move the mic a little closer? Okay. So, basically the role of the state, as has been through all your bond projects in the past, has been to provide state construction assistance should the bond pass. There's kind of an elaborate formula that goes along with that as to how that funding is calculated, what is matched in a project. Obviously, we provide a percentage of construction assistance on the construction. We also provide a percentage of assistance on some of the soft costs that the architects and designers will refer to, such as their architect's fees, the construction management fees, some of the inspections and testing. There's a list of these things on our website in the manual, if you really want to take and dig into that level. If I could make a suggestion, don't get too wrapped up in the D-form process and the processes that are outlined in there. Those are kind of the refining steps that we go through to get state assistance, not what I think your major task is that you've got in front of you, is whether you're going to modernize the building or replace it. I think those are the things you're going to have to focus on. I think the other thing is that you've got a situation of trying to compare what the state money is going to be, since it's based on modernization and or replacement. The state money will essentially be the same no matter what you choose. There will be some dollars worth of difference one way or the other, but I don't think it's going to be enough to significantly impact your decision. So I just want to get that kind of out there. First of all, that I'm not going to be the guy who's going to come here and say, you build a new building, you're going to get $20 million more from the state than if you modernize or vice versa. So I don't think that's going to really have a major impact on any of these decisions or considerations that you try to make. So, what were the other topics, Paul, that we wanted to kind of get through?
Acreage.
Acreage. Okay, there is a guideline, and it's based on usable program space. Keep in mind, one of the mantras that I've used over the 20 years I've been doing this, and I didn't come up with it, I heard somebody say it a long time ago, and I just thought it was great. The idea of a school is not just to be a box to stuff kids into. You want to build a container to suit the program that's going to go into it. So you really have to think about what the program is going to be. Let's face it, we're in the 21st century now, and a building that was built in the 1920s might require extensive modernization to meet 21st century educational requirements. So those are all things you have to keep in mind. As far as site requirements go, there really aren't requirements so much as will you deliver an adequate program. The guidelines, and this is based on a generalized national standard through the Council of Educational Facilities Planners International, CEFDI, letters in this business. The recommendation basically for a middle school would be 10 acres plus 1 acre for every 100 students, and those would be usable acres. And I've seen places that have got 100 acres, but half of it's vertical. So we say it needs to be usable acreage. Similarly, there's districts that have buildings that have been in place forever, and they're on very small sites. I'm from the Spokane area. If you ever drive through Spokane and spit off the freeway, we have Lewis and Clark High School, which occupies about 2 city blocks. And you've got, I think, maybe one little playfield on there. That's by no means enough acreage by what we just talked about to support a high school that size. They've got playfields probably 5 miles away from South Hill that they use for all their PE classes, etc. But they're not going to move a high school that's been there since 1898. So, what we ask when you apply for state funding and you're talking about a site size, that your school board would certify that they've evaluated the programmatic needs of that facility, and that site and facility will fit the academic requirements for the district. So that's where you have, I guess, basically a way around what the suggested requirements are. But really when you start coming back to thinking about code requirements that you have in the community for parking, off-site setback requirements, etc., playfield usage, there is a lot lot to be considered on what you need for the site to use things. So consider wisely. Other topics? I'm open to questions. I'm a conversationalist type person. Yes, James.
There's this RCW that permeates the whole handbook on high-performance public buildings. Could you explain that?
Okay.
Because it's important, I guess. I know.
It is. The legislature, as you all know, we're getting into a green economy. And the legislature, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, basically came up with the green building approach for all public school or all public construction in the state of Washington. There's several sets of requirements to meet this. There's the LEED, which is, I can't think of what the letters stand for offhand, which is a national standard that can get accreditation. There's also what we refer to as the WSSP, which is the Washington Sustainable Schools Protocol. Basically, that was developed off of the California High Performance School Protocols because the original LEED formulas were not necessarily geared toward an educational facility. So California modernized or adapted their rules and requirements to be more or less adapted to educational environments. Washington took that California program and modified it to fit our needs in the state of Washington. Now, there's a variety of checklists in there where you can use points or lose points to reach the energy efficiency goals. Does that answer your question, Jim? Or?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, if you're talking about a building that's 1 story as opposed to, which is the possibility here, to one that's 2 or 3 stories, how that, it's things I never thought of. And I don't know.
I think that's a question for your A&E firms.
Yeah, okay.
Building
Efficiency
yeah.
or long life cycle.
Right, life cycle costing, that's all part of it. I mean, the life cycle costing scenario has been part of the requirements for years and years as you evaluate those in a building. So, let's face it, everybody wants to get the most bang for their buck out of the building. And just because you spend more money for something does not necessarily mean that's the most effective, cost-effective, long-range way of doing something. Yes, sir.
I've read some of the LEED requirements. I know one of the larger requirements is location for energy efficiency and whatnot. Say if you're located at school out on the edge of town, I'll split the drive there, all that kind of stuff. I know the current location of Morgan Middle School is a great location. I just like to throw out the idea of maybe purchasing some land that's across the street from Morgan Middle School. Say that kind of section of houses. I don't know. I just thought it maybe, because I mean, it's a great location, and I know location is a big part of the LEED standards.
That would certainly be something to put into consideration.
As far as you mentioned about the programmative use that the school board has to come up with for choosing how big the site has to be. Does OSFI also have recommendations as far as funding those for those programs that would use the site? You know, as an example, 19 acres has always been thrown around, and in that 19 acres, it's kind of my understanding that there'd be tennis courts and baseball fields and soccer fields and the track and everything. So along with that, actually 2 questions. Does OSFI have the recommendations for what schools should budget and fund for those? And the other thing is does OSFI have a recommendation for school districts to have a facilities plan to take care of those facilities that they currently have, as well as that they're going to either modernize or build new?
We do not have a programmatic approach that says this is what you shall put on your property. You shall have 5 tennis courts, you shall have a track. No, we don't do that. Similarly, we don't come in and say, here's the maintenance checklist that you're supposed to do. Now, having said that, you will have not truly a maintenance system, but one where it evaluates the building on an annual basis, reports to the local school board, and then gets filed in Olympia. The legislature is very interested in that. That's why this program is coming into effect. They want to know what's going on in the buildings and what the evaluations are of the buildings statewide. It's just getting started. We won't have really any good information on that for probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So,
But the reason why I ask that is that, you know, the Osmonds often thrown out to the community for wanting this, or in some cases for requiring. But then again, it seems like from a standpoint of the school district maintaining what they have, that should be part of Osmonds positioning as well, is to at least through recommendations, what the district should do and provide in order to get future funds.
like I say, that is part of the requirement, that a school district must maintain the facilities, and they must be maintained to a certain level. And that's one of the reasons that this process is coming in. We do it now to a certain extent on a paper basis, but say piles here, piles there, it's not really accessible. So like I say, it's being computerized and it's being, as far as human input goes, I'm the guy who covers Eastern Washington. That's something like 145 different school districts, and I get spread pretty thin. So once again, keep in mind that OSBI is not so much, at least I should say in our school construction assistance program, is not so much an enforcement group as it is funding group. You might find OSBI as being involved in certain programmatic administrations and portion or dollar funding things, but there's a lot more requirement in enforcement type of, but not in the construction assistance program.
I'll ask you to do it.
Oh, I have 2 questions. Partly I'm getting my mind around this relationship here. So I've heard requirements a couple times and recommendations all the time. So just for clarification, there are certain requirements from OSBI toward the district with regard to the construction process, or do they all primarily fall into that category of recommendations? That's one question. And the second question is...
I can answer yes.
Yes.
Recommendations and requirements.
Both, okay.
Yeah.
And would it be an expectation of this committee to understand both of those?
If you want to point to the exact specific item, I can say whether it's a requirement or a suggestion. Yeah.
I guess in terms of the charge that we have in place in terms of interpreting the data and making recommendations to the community, it's important for us to distinguish what's a requirement, what's a recommendation.
I am not tonight, at least in the context where I think this meeting and this committee is about, I think that there's going to be OSBI requirements.
Okay.
Okay. The requirements are going to come when you start applying for state money.
Okay.
Then I put on my glasses and I really look hard and fast at it.
And the second part of that question has to do with money. You mentioned earlier that the state has formulas for determining the state funds that you give towards the construction. And I'm just curious, do those formulas change with things like state economics and politics? Or is that something that is fairly predictable and consistent?
The formulas themselves don't change. They have evolved slowly over the years. The formulas have basically stayed the same forever. The one thing that can have an impact, though, for instance, let's talk about the assistance percentage that you'll see. I think right now it's something around 56, 57% that we're showing for the Ellenberg School District. Now that changes annually because that assistance percentage is basically built around the assessed valuation per pupil within the school district. So that's going to change every year as the assessor sends information in. Generally, it's not going to change a whole lot, but you know, it could be 1% or 2% a year. So that's one thing that can change that way. Similarly, we calculate eligibilities based on projected enrollments. So your enrollments every year roll up and down, up and down. I think the numbers we were working with this year are actually a little better than they were last year. But if you look out for one more year, it might be a little worse again. So you say there's some timing issues that come in too.
But those would be consistent remodel versus new construction. The ebb and flow
Yeah,
wouldn't matter.
and I think there's enough cushion that as far as Morgan is concerned, you won't have a problem covering that. There's a gentleman back here that
Yes, thank you. I believe the Seattle School District recently remodeled their Madison Middle School, which is somewhat similar to Morgan. Can you just give us a brief overview of how they work with your organization and met your requirements to do that renovation?
I haven't had the advantage of working on the other side of the Cascades. I can't make that comparison.
Does the manual outline does it provide guidelines regarding what goes into the school, not just the building of the shell, but also into it? And if it does, which I haven't assume it does, so you would be encouraged to, we would be encouraged to make recommendations regarding equipment that goes in as a part of the larger proposal, yes?
There's nothing like that in the budget.
There's nothing like that. Okay.
Basically, see, this is kind of a, dare I say, an IRS manual, how to go about getting money. Rather than downloading the whole 200-page program, if you basically read Chapter 2, Chapter 2 is essentially an overview chapter. About a 20-minute read if you go through it that way. Certainly not all the details and everything. But like I say, this is a planning guide. And a planning guide to how to go about getting into the state funding cycle. Gives you nothing really other than maybe some cursory suggestions on how to go about planning, establishing a local committee, to provide that input. Basically, you're talking about what you're going to do to the building as far as even the structural shell of the thing goes, let alone the program that goes into it. That's all up to the educators that develop the program, the architects and engineers that do the building.
Okay. And I'm in the same boat. I'm trying to make sure I understand, or at least ask a question while you're here. So does that mean then that the assistance that's described in here is more about building a facility, not necessarily about equipment and so forth that would fund the program, essentially? Or is it both?
In the funding mix, and this is where I don't want to get into too many of the details of how dollars and cents are calculated, but there is an assistance percentage that's also applied to what we refer to as FF&E, furniture, fixture, and equipment. So an equipment allowance that goes into things, because you're only going to put so much into the structure itself. Then you're going to have desks and smart boards and blackboards. Blackboards in the anyway, I think maybe there'd be some suggestions in there that you don't want to consider opaque projectors anymore. That there's better technology than that available. Like I said, we're not into that end of the business. So what we offer, like I say, is kind of a basic roadmap. You really ought to put together a committee to help you, the community, decide which way to go. This is the due diligence aspect of community planning and school planning and construction planning and bond planning. So that's what we try to help with.
I'm a little dense, so I'm following up on Sue's question. Because you're talking now about recommendations and requirements, and I thought I heard you say it's all recommendations until you ask for money and we have a list of requirements. When you talk about the funding part, are those the state matching funds that you're talking about, or is this different funding?
No, what I'm talking about is the requirements to achieve state funding. For instance, you can't just go out and throw up a basic box of building. It's got to meet code requirements. It has to be accepted by your school board. These are the things I'm talking about that are requirements.
And where's that list for the committee? I mean, is it something that
I think that's a detail that you really don't need to address in this committee, at least right now. I think you're wrapping around the requirements being what you would have to do to get the state funding, like the submittal date cutoff requirements. That's a date in time that's going to occur at some point in time after you pass your bond. Then you're going to have other cutoff dates that are going to be requirements that you'll have to meet, timelines, deadlines, in order to stay in line for state funding. Those are the requirements. No, not beyond, like I said, local code requirements that are going to be involved. I mean, there's still going to be that. That's not the assistance requirement. You'll have to prove that you've met that. You'll have to get the building official to write an approval letter on the design. And you're going to have to get the building official to give you an occupancy permit before you can use it. Those are all requirements that are going to have to be met before the state contributes funding too. But like I said, this is just all due diligence in doing the project. Does that help? Okay. Somebody else had a question?
Well, one second.
I think what we're grappling with possibly is the criteria or the program that the district or the school needs to provide to the kids is missing here. And that does, does the remodel provide that as an option? Does the remodel have that criteria in mind, or does a new school have that criteria in mind? You're a funding source. So you're saying, school district, develop your own criteria, develop your own program. If it needs to have an auditorium, or if it needs to have, 5 acres of play fields or whatever, we want you to be able to have a middle school that meets these, that will meet your criteria and building codes and it looks like this or whatever. In that is the LEED, is a LEED or the green building or a WSSP standards. Pretty much all public buildings have to meet those. Then you come out and you say, well, now if you want to have some state matching funds or some money from the state, you have to make sure you meet certain guidelines that we have. And I think that's what maybe people are looking for. What are those guidelines? But you're saying, no, don't dwell on those at this time. Dwell on, if anything, the main program. So that you can compare your model renovation of Morgan to make sure it meets that program. And you can compare that same model or that criteria to a new building to make sure the two of them both meet the criteria going forward to a 21st century learning facility. Is that, so you're a funding source. You're not a specifier to come in here and say to the district, you have to have this, you have to have that, it has to have this kind of a ceiling, it has to have this kind of a roof. You're not going to do that. That's up to the A&E team to work with the district and develop that. Is that correct?
He's doing my job better than I am. Yes. I think you've got a good grasp of it.
Yeah, those are educational specifications that's in this manual, and it's replete with, classrooms, laboratories, library space, all the things you think about. You might or might not want the community or whatever suggested. There's the theater, there's non-instructional areas. Those are cost factors, and they're certainly worth comparing. There's a comparison there between those two buildings. What can you put in a remodel? What can you put in a new building? Yeah, those are pretty important.
Yeah, if I may, I think the criteria has to be a benchmark by which you compare two options. An option of a remodel and an option of a new build. And in there, that's going to help, I think, develop cost, schedule, impacts to the community. It starts to really develop Stonewall into truly having as we've been saying, apples-to-apples comparison of where we're heading and which option is the best for the community.
As I understand it, the remodel, if we went that way, would have the same funding, because there's something in here I recall that says if it's less than 40% or 60%, then they won't fund it. It's got to be over that. But we're not, space and square footage requirements, I think we have to pay attention to. I'm not positive on that. But there are some requirements, but I don't know what they all are.
So then to follow that up, with both of you up, then when it comes time to ask for state assistance, the school district will present, we want to build this building to satisfy this program that we feel is best for our community. And whoever it is that's going to grant that will say, yes, that works, or no, it doesn't, right? And to achieve it, and it's based on the ability, I'm asking, is it based on the ability to, in effect, defend the program that we want to offer?
just go through it. I didn't want to go into this level of detail, but let me just give you a quick rundown of what we refer to as a D-born process. We have a series of steps that we go through, and this is all in the facilities manual. You can find it on that chapter 2 as well. The first thing you'll do would be to submit a project application form. And really, it's very simple. It just says, we want to modernize a building, X number of square feet. We want to replace a building, X number of square feet, or we want to build a new building, X number of square feet. It's signed, sent to us. We do the calculation. There's a few other little steps go along here. We calculate the eligibilities, et cetera. And we come back and we say, yes, if you want to modernize 100,000 square feet, here is what the formula says you theoretically get at the end of the project, based on 100,000 square feet. Okay? Now you proceed along through the project, and within a year of that date, you're going to be submitting the D5, which basically says, okay, now we're at that interim point. We've had our preliminary meetings with the health department and code officials, all preliminary. We've developed our set of educational specifications, and we've passed a series of resolutions to say it's not going to create racial imbalances, et cetera, and you submit that. Then the next step, now this is when it starts to get a little more serious, is because the next thing you're going to get to is submitting as a D7 form. Now D7 is serious business. This means you're actually out on the street to bid the project. Okay? What that means is you've got, well, the project is out in the plan rooms for the contractors to look at. The architect's already designed the building. You've got all your code approvals, et cetera, You're ready to go with this. We send you back a D8 form, which is your authorization to open bids on the project. And it will also have a series of formulas in there based on the contractual amounts and the architect's construction estimates as to what the cost of that's going to be it modernization, be it new construction, be it whatever. Then you'll open the bids, you'll take what the contractor says you can build the building for, and you will submit a D9 form to us. Okay? Make good your taxes sound easy, let me tell you. On the D9, basically you'll be doing the same thing you did on the D7, except you're going to be working off of hard numbers. You now have a bid from the electrical contractor, the general contractor, the mechanical contractor. You know what that building is going to cost you right now. Okay? Aside from change orders and all those other little things that might rear their ugly head. But that is going to be the cost of the project. We then send you a D10 form that says, sign the contract and really tear your hair out. Okay? Once that D10 is issued, you now probably have a year, 18-month construction period or whatever that goes on. During which period of time you're sending bills to Olympia and the gal that does all the disbursements is tearing her hair out and talking to your accounting people and getting everything taken care of. When the project finally gets all done, you're going to submit one more form and probably send it 2, 3, 4 more times, which is called the D11 form. Yeah, this is the last one you're going to send in. Okay, that D11 basically is your project closeout information. And it releases the bonds and redeems and everything to your contractors. The project's all done. Your board has accepted the building. And now you go into this computer maintenance program I was telling you about. And everybody's all happy. You got this big, beautiful building going on. And that's basically the process you follow when you get to high school.
Great. Yeah, so, promise last one. Okay.
Just don't take it to go.
No.
I understand.
At which D form is the money actually in place? In other words, when, with D what is when the bond has passed?
The commitment of the state funds does not occur until the issuance of that D10. We authorize you to sign contracts. There's no commitment of state funds until the issuance of the D10. This is where the betting all comes in, the Olympia watching, what's going to be in the capital budget, what goes on that way. Technically, legally, there's no commitment of state funds until D10. I'll tell you, we will not issue a D8 unless we know there's going to be state funding. So you'll know whether or not you're going to get funding when you're out to bid. Yeah, right. Trust me.
Trying to take advantage of you being here for this committee.
You know more about my job than
curious, with your knowledge and your experience, so this is, I'm trying to grossly oversimplify what this committee is charged with. One of the things I believe is to look at two different options, a new build versus a renovation or modernization. Do you have any recommendations, or from your experience, can you say, you know, typically we provide more state funds if you head down this path versus that path? And I'm not trying to pin you down, I'm trying to get out in the open some your experience. I mean, you be here.
He just said that they're about the same. Yeah, the reason is, what you're talking about here is modernization versus what new in lieu construction. New in lieu construction is, in essence, we don't want to modernize the building, we want to build a new one in lieu of modernization. So, like I say, the money is essentially the same. The only time you'd be talking about is there going to be any additional money would be if you have a whole herd of portables out there, you know, 500 kids with no roof over their head, and we were going to build new unhoused square footage. So, like I say, it's really kind of a which way do you want to go type of decision. The money, in essence, will be the same. There's a few minor formula differences between new and lieu construction and modernization, but not significant dollars.
Does OSBE, one of the issues in this district is that in Morgan, the population there has been pretty static, 700 since about 1960. And the new school proposal in both the modernized on Morgan addresses enrollment up to 900. Again, in OSBE's book, do they have any kind of factual information or guidelines for school districts for future growth, or is that again up to the board?
Yes, and I mean, there's various ways of looking at demographics. The cohort numbers that we generate that you can find online are basically built on enrollments once kids hit in school. I mean, it's a regression analysis that projects things through, but until the kid gets into kindergarten, they're not counted. So I mean, there are places in the state where you've got some huge housing development going on, or on the west side, maybe a new naval base comes in or something that needs hundreds and hundreds of families, you know, within a 1 year period of time. It just blows things through the roof. That still has no impact until the kids get into the school system. So, like I say, I think if you're really looking at things like that, you need to talk about, you know, demographics, talk to the county, talk to the city, see where the growth might be going on, and if there are things like that to project.
Does OSBE often recommend, one of the things that hasn't been done in the last 3, do they recommend doing a demographic study or even a traffic study? Is that in the manual, or again, that's up to each district? Or?
Well, when you talk about a demographic study, those are kind of above and beyond what we require a district to do. But districts do them.
Some districts do.
Yeah, I had seen districts coming, Tri-Cities, I think, has done some demographic studies because they've been rapidly growing. So that's one of the things. Traffic studies, that's probably something that's going to be required as a part of your code approval locally. You know, what is this going to do to the traffic pattern? I have seen projects where, in addition to the school districts have also ended up paying something like maybe $1 million in traffic renovations, putting in stoplights, et cetera, et cetera.
With OSBE, we have a pretty horrendous traffic mitigation fee here, and it involves schools as well. So on a new school, does OSBE, the state matching funds match those, or?
We match costs only on site.
Right, that's what I understood.
If there are off-site costs, those are totally borne by the district.
But no mitigation.
You know what bothers me about this whole discussion? The state cannot give us anything that it doesn't take from us initially. And matching funds has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And I think what we're talking about is whether or not we want to buy a Lexus or a Cadillac or Mercedes-Benz, and we are struggling to make payments on our Ford. And I don't think this community is in any way averse to that it could have some problems in an earthquake, but it did go through an earthquake.
I think that's a question that you need to address with the architects and engineers and designers.
The architects didn't say the thing was gonna fall down, they questioned whether it needed to be some support.
Well, once again, I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish in meeting here tonight. Yes, sir.
Well, he has a good point. And that is,
So just for a process point, the representative from OSPI is here to answer questions about the OSPI process.
I can't hear you.
There may be public input that.
I can't hear that, cannot hear you.
Let me come over the mic. The OSPI representative is here tonight to answer questions that relate to the school's funding from the state, not to take public comment or input on whether it makes more sense to modernize Morgan or to build a new school. That's a decision, not a decision, but that's the input that the committee will be receiving. And hopefully there'll be methods for the public to access the committee and share their perspectives. The questions that we want to direct towards the OSPI representatives relate to the process for public funding of a school in Ellensburg. And so we're trying not to get into the merits of one option or the other at this point. We're gathering information for the committee and the general public from the OSPI's perspective on how that funding process works. So if your comment is not a question, I'd ask you to hang on to it and wait until a later point when we get that input to the committee. Thanks. So one question that I had as follow-up over here was the state funding mechanism is the same whether it's remodel or build new, but the question I think may have been as follow-up to that is if there were different costs for remodeling or expanding on Morgan or building a new school, would the state give the same amount of money? And I think the formula would be the same, but if the costs were different, then the match would be different. Yeah.
This once again comes back to the formulas and just driving money from the state. We base our basic calculations, let's just talk about the construction cost assistance number that we use. Right now, we're looking at, in July, recognizing construction costs of $188 and some odd cents a square foot. That doesn't mean you can build a building for that. That's just what the legislature says we can recognize in terms of construction costs. Building construction, depending on what you're building, where you're building, etc., can be quite a bit higher than that. There are some buildings that are coming in for a little less, but pretty rare, and they're pretty basic buildings. So, like I say, that's just a number that we're looking at. My wild guess would be that whether you build a new building or modernize Morgan, you're going to be spending every bit of that $188 a square foot, probably a little bit more. So the state bases their matching percentage on that $188. Okay? That's not going to be how we're going to calculate that and make any additional split. It's got a lot of hands there. I think this gentleman back there.
So this is for my personal gain. How much usually does it cost to take down a school that's already up and build a new one from scratch? Just in the years that you've been.
You're going to have to vary so much site to site, building by building. I couldn't put any kind of a number on that. That's something you probably have to ask your A&E team when they're here in a week or two.
And A&E stands for?
Architects and engineers. Yes, sir.
Are you in charge?
I asked to serve as a facilitator.
I understood when we came as a committee, we're not the school board, that we were supposed to figure out a location and which was going to be better, remodel it or build a new one, and which parts to remodel. We did. Did I misinterpret? I mean, this is blah, 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 blah.
So the committee's charge is to hear the information shared by the various experts and people with information, and then present its findings to the school board. The school board is the final decision maker, whether.
But I thought all these questions that are being asked to this fellow, the school board would address. No.
I'm sorry, maybe you can phrase your question differently.
Well, I thought that, I guess I'm totally in the dark. I thought we were supposed to help decide which option would be the best and sell it to the community. And the school board would work with this gentleman more than we would.
Yes, and I think that's the point that Mr. Miller is making, is that a lot of the decisions that would affect the actual funding thing would not come about until the bond is proposed and we have a plan in place. And that's why we're trying to not have.
I think it's just a point of trying to give you some background with what the state assistance is in this. And you say, just my general sweeping decision, that word, my sweeping feeling is that it's going to be a non-factor in whatever your determination is, because the state dollars will, in essence, be essentially the same, be it new or be it mod.
And you said that 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
My
wife told me that.
He's a timeline guy. That's right.
As a rancher, that's the only way you can make it work.
There were some other hands, but I'm not sure if they were for kind of the committee process or for the OSDR. If there's not any more from the committee that reflect back to the OSDI, then we probably need to take time until the committee work as well. So Fritz, I don't know whether you're...
I was going to say that I think Sam's right on. Our job is really to build confidence in the community that where the school board is making the right decisions. And that the data is correct and evaluate the options, not get into the feeling the facts, take a Joe Friday approach. What are the facts? That's where I think you should be looking. And that is hard to do in this kind of group of committees. If we would break into a funding committee, a committee to look at each of the proposals and become familiar with them, and a community relations committee, say, that would deal, we need to have interaction with the school board while this process is going on, so that we don't get to the end of the line and the school board says, well, you're not telling us, you're not helping us at all. I mean, there has to be a lot of action that goes on, not in this room, but in relationships and building that confidence that when we start talking about 8, 9, 10, and 7, I mean, this makes our eyes close. But, yeah. So I just hope that we organize in a way that we can actually accomplish our mission of building confidence in the community.
And one of the recommendations that came up earlier was to use the kind of the breakdown of information in, I guess, Chapter 2 to determine what committees would be necessary or useful. So that you have some thought that may be broader than just that facilities planning piece that relates to kind of interaction between the committee and the school board, community relations as well.
That's right. We've got to build confidence.
So let me just see if there's no more questions then to Mr. Miller, then we would probably do the next pieces of the committee tour.
I'll be here for a while.
Sue and Kate, I'm not sure who.
Building on from what Fritz just said, in my understanding at this point in time, that first charge on the letter that you sent us, restructuring costs of remodeling the current middle school versus building a new one, seems to me like the million-dollar question. And that is where I need the most assistance in figuring out how I can participate in this committee and have some input. I need to understand what that means. I need to see A and A, B and B, C and C, down through all the items and what it will cost in the two different forms. what do we want the middle school to look like before we can, is that what you were, okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I have to apologize. All I know about the Oregon Middle School is what I read in the Daily Record. But I would like, I wrote down some facts. I know that we're at 700, we're projected to maybe grow to 900. I know that's what we could grow to if we build. I don't know anything about what our plans are, what we dream about, and what we want, what are minimum requirements, what kind of programs we have, and what kind of programs we might want. And if there's something I can read to get caught up, I just really need to know more about what it is we're trying to do before you start trying to decide if it's going to fit here or it's going to fit here. I really don't know much about Oregon Middle School, and maybe I should just go home.
No.
But before I can decide relocate or, I have no preconceived notions because I don't know what it is we're trying to build or renovate.
And as a parent, I have to say that I'd rather have that conversation first. Because if we have that conversation first, then the answer may actually reveal itself to us. You may get to the point of saying, well, if this is what we want, then the remodel is the answer. Or if this is the bulk of what we want, a remodel won't satisfy. And I'm not saying one or the other. I'm just saying that we may discover that by looking at what we want the program.
I agree completely.
Even if it's not our decision, and even if that's not really what they're asking us to do, I think it helps us make that decision. So I think that's a great suggestion.
I don't think we can make a decision unless we look at the educational environment that we want the future generations.
Because otherwise, what we're talking about is money, and not our kids.
And we're not basing the conversations on anything that matters.
Right. And the money's important.
And honestly, when you said we have all of these issues, and you named transparency and community trust and all those things, this group doesn't have those issues. This group's trying to provide answers to help solve those issues, but they're not this particular issue. I'm sorry, school board district. They're out there, I realize that, but that's shouldn't at this point at least be directed at us, at least not yet.
And is there anything out there, like, I certainly don't remember seeing anything as far as this is what we want it to look like, this is what we're hoping for that building. Is there stuff out there that we can?
As far as programs,
Yeah.
We typically go through that specification process, identify the types of programs we want to have and how those programs are going to fit into a building. I think Gary said you typically want to build a program and then have the building support those programs instead of have a building and then try to fit a program into that building. So what I really hear, one of the things that this committee really needs to know is, okay, what program do we want to have in this school district, and what's going to be supported by Morgan Middle School?
I'll go you one better. I'd like to know what we do have, because I know what my kid goes through, and I know what my first kid went through. They're sort of the same, but that doesn't mean that I know everything that goes on. And so I'd like to know what is. And it might be nice also to hear, particularly from the teachers, what is missing or what could be.
Is it possible to sit down with the teachers? Isn't that one of
So
our
people can speak up, I'm not sure others can hear you, Kelly.
Oh, I was just wondering if it's possible to sit down with the teachers if you said that was on there. Well, it's our third charge, but academic needs, and I think that needs to be the first thing we look at is, what.
Is there a program for an aspect now? Is there one?
There is information online, where you can look at the departments that are available.
No, I mean the projected program for this, for what we were looking for bond.
The principal has provided that information, and so the building principal and some of the various grade levels, academics in those grade levels can always sit down with this group and say, this is what I want to see in the building.
This is what we have, and this is what
Whether it's new or remodel, this is what I want to see.
So what you said the principal presented, is that something we can read through before we sit down and talk about, so we can have discussions when we sit down, or?
So let me just check, it seems like there's, from the voices that have been heard, there's consensus that that be the first step for the committee. And that you're requesting that presentation be it when you next get together, and that precede anything that's coming from architects.
Well, the program should include what is existing at Morgan right now and the square footages associated with those spaces, and then what you're wanting to have with this bond. And so what is maybe larger or smaller, and or what you're adding to it. So we should have that kind of comparison. It would be good to have that document, that information is available.
Michelle, is it possible to email that to us so we can come to our next meeting prepared and having read it?
Absolutely, but I probably need a couple of days to put together, because like
That
comparing
could be
what's
agenda item
existing
number
and,
one.
yep, there you go.
So right now, the kind of square footage piece isn't a part of that, we could do that within a few days.
Yes, if I can have until Monday, if you want to have it.
And floor plans for the existing building,
We can,
small scale floor plans would be just like Morgan.
or next call.
Actually, I was also going to ask, I've never been in Morgan Middle School, so anyone here?
So you're
I
wanting
just
to
would,
do
I would
it.
like to watch the tour.
With the principal and teachers.
Okay, let's understand what Michelle's gonna give us. Michelle, you're gonna have your, is this correct? Existing programs, what teachers would like to see in a new school?
What I have currently on paper is, I can put together existing programs, and then I have what we had requested when we were working with the architects last year for the pre-bond stuff. We haven't gone through the ed specifications committee or process to be able to determine what exactly.
Excuse me, it's hard to hear her.
So, as the educational specifications process usually involves committee people from within the community as well, and that process didn't happen pre-bond because it would so the level of specification I think probably is not as detailed in terms of we haven't sat down as a staff to say this is every level of detail that we would want or things like that, but I have some generic information and I'd be happy to for a future meeting have.
So if we got that in a week or by Monday or whatever, let's not put any more pressure on you. But let's say Monday or Tuesday, then you would be here to answer any questions we would have as a group,
Yes.
as a committee.
At our next meeting?
Yes.
Would you
maybe
also like teachers?
Yes.
Yes. Well, we have one here.
Yes.
But yeah,
And-
but invite the teachers to our next meeting.
I would, I guess
Well, no.
I can look at the different programs that we have
Yeah.
and bring, yes, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yep.
So, Michelle, and committee, how much time would you want to dedicate towards that conversation? Do you want to have any other presentations when you guys get together, or is that, we need to kind of concentrate on that?
Half hour. Huh?
The strategy is allocate 2 hours, and then you have only take 1 hour.
Yeah, but we have
Early. If you do
No,
if you
we're trying
schedule a
to-
half hour, if you schedule a half hour and it goes an hour, everybody's mad that it went too long.
Okay, well,
So I think that's a meeting in and of itself. And that seems to be the critical piece before we can decide any.
What I'm hearing is that people would like to have only that information coming via email to all the committee members, hopefully as soon as Monday or early next week. And then Principal Michelle, I'm not remembering your last name. Hibbich. And staff from different departments would be here to answer questions based on the report. And that would be the only content information you receive that day. Okay, and that the goal would be to have an hour. Is that right? I was kind of a little bit confused. Jim was suggesting 30 minutes.
no, I was just, an hour is fine.
Okay. But with the,
What I just want to say is, I've cheated and read the book, okay? So educational specifications, Michelle, if we follow it, it's subjects, methods, instructional, non-instructional, relationships, you know, there's all kinds of, eliminate duplications. Are you addressing this?
I think I need to read chapter 2.
It would be helpful because it's in the handbook.
Yeah,
And it would help us, I think.
okay.
So would it be appropriate at this point then to kind of do a little bit of work on committee time frame and making sure that that next meeting works for May 2nd, I propose? So seems like people's maximum time request would be 2 hours, so 6:30 to 8:30, or shorter. People wanting shorter. Anyone wanting longer? Don't raise your hand. You'll be good.
I say 2 hours, and we try and get out of it.
And then, am I the only one that has a conflict? I will always have conflict. I just like it better. Okay.
So proposal has been for first and third Wednesdays, 6:30 to 8:30. But are there other nights that don't, that people not have conflicts? You're on Tuesday night right now. But is that functional for future meetings? Anybody have a problem with conflict?
Tuesday would work easier for me, because it's not a family obligation, it's a church obligation, and I have a very specific group of children. So I hate to cancel their program.
I got a problem with classes on Wednesday nights, so that's
Tuesday
Yeah, but
works
you know,
better.
something that doesn't fall.
And not the Tuesday?
Anyone? Okay, so let me just finish off on this topic. So first and third Tuesdays will be May 1st and May 15th.
That's okay.
No one's raising objections.
Thanks.
Everybody's checking their iPhone.
No.
Okay, so wait a second.
I still have.
So no one had a conflict with Tuesdays.
I do have the third Tuesday or Wednesday is after the June 15th deadline.
Well, the deadline was kind of imposed, anticipating that people wouldn't want to work after the end of school year. But if you're all willing to do that past that point, then
It's just a few days.
yeah.
So we're talking May 1st and May 15th.
As the next two.
I so moved. Whatever.
Aye.
Is that okay?
Sure.
And then June.
You know, this 2 hours running on just the educational specifications, I would like to have a second topic in case we get through it. You know, if it's pretty cut and dry. At least we absorb it and sit with it for a while. I don't know that we're going to make a decision next meeting, but we might want to have another agenda item.
So is that something that the code requirement is for the facility, Mike?
Whatever.
Who is that? Is there somebody coming in to present the code requirement? Or is it the city?
We would find some.
So just as a point of, you don't want to ask someone to be here from far away and not know you're going to use them.
Right.
But if you could do it locally, it would probably be feasible.
I just didn't know.
Okay, so it might be useful if you get into the programming aspect to be able to talk about the facilities implications.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, I don't know if we would need the city of Ellensburg to talk about codes, because your architects and engineers are more than familiar with that. And besides being familiar with the codes, they are familiar with the program as well, and can talk about some of the implications of including certain program items or not. So I think they can cover both of those.
On the topic of having the teachers come, would it be reasonable to also have a member of the maintenance team and possibly food services?
Absolutely.
Because teachers aren't the only ones that have needs in the building. How is it maintained and how is it currently being operated? Would be a benefit to know about.
Maybe the answer is for Michelle just to think about the entire facility and what representation needs to be present.
I've been jotting down some notes, so I added custodial and food service.
we don't do anything for a week, 2 weeks, except get educated about the academic situation, we're I shouldn't say wasting our time, but we're using up time that we should have. We should be looking at the things that are on our chart while at the same time we're getting educated. I think there ought to be some assignments made where people are going to review, understand these proposals, and understand what the proposals the school board made before. I mean, this ground has been plowed 3 times.
But some of us are new in the harness, so to speak.
Sure, including myself. But at the same time, while I'm getting educated as to what the academic is, we need to be doing work on our assignments. And we're not just taking one course here. We've got a multitude of tasks to get done, and we're only going to get it done if there's some accountability and people have specific areas of direction. Because otherwise, we're going to just spend our time talking about D1s and D9s and that sort of thing.
So there's a list here. We have a possible agenda, things to review. Can we take a look at what was sent to us and isolate some things that you might want to know more about? Maybe there'll be 2 or 3 on a committee to take a look at bond structure. We have sources right here in the school district that can provide that to us. I mean,
the funding and the bonds and the money
and what's the very model, Michelle? I don't know what's the very model of a model middle school. You know.
I'm sorry.
One of the agenda items is the office of superintendent. I couldn't find it. Recommendations for a middle school facility and campus. Are you going to provide that? Do you know where that is?
Well, I think that some of what the space thing was addressed, but I can look at you, Beth. Whatever I can find, I'll send your way.
So that we can look at what a model is, there must be one. I know we're building one in Renton right now for $97 million. And then one of the students in the class told me about it. We could take a look at that as opposed to alongside what you want. And that's an agenda item. And it's a cost item. And the whole idea of Farley floating the bond, telling us what in fact that means in terms of money. If it should be 30,000 or 100,000.
I'm sure you want me to do that, kid.
I mean, things like that to move us forward.
And I don't know if the location of the meeting is up for discussion, or if you want to set a time. I'd be happy to give anyone tours. If you want to have the meeting at Morgan, following a tour, if that would be helpful, I'm happy to do that. I know Jim.
I think you have 2 resources that you might want to consider. You have 2 architectural firms, one that has worked already with the district in developing a criteria and a program for a new build, and then Doug's firm, and they both have a wealth of knowledge of what a middle school model looks like, plus what Michelle specifically for the district. So if you took those 3 pieces of information and pieced them together, I don't know how important it is that you all agree, but I do think it is important that you have a prototype model that you then apply to both options. So why? So that you can get apple-to-apple dollars. That's really what you're going to wrestle with, and that's what the public wants to know. What is the cost to go build a remodel? What's the cost of a new construction? Well, you want to have that model, that criteria, identical in both options. And I think you're probably close, but I think if you took your 2 architectural firms, which are scheduled, I think, for the next meeting, and maybe prep them and ask them to come in and say, not only tell us what you had in your model or your plan, but what would give us some criteria by which we can form a prototype. And I think they're a wealth of knowledge for you if you want to use it for your resource.
So would you suggest like a square footage comparison, like for,
That's all part of it. I think there's bigger things such as how big is your science program? How big is your art program? How big is your PE program? Those big program blocks those bids drill in eventually into square footage, which comes up to 100 and whatever thousand square feet of
Right,
something.
right.
So would it make sense then to indeed have the architects and the engineers next week to actually listen to the academic program, hear from teachers, and then respond to them? Does that make sense, or is that too much?
We're gonna have apples to apples.
Can we
The
let
architects
them know that we don't want to hear see that, we want to just hear? So are those, are the architects, I know the study is located out of Seattle?
Right, and one of the things to consider, and I don't, it's very hard, the SETI, when we hired and came over and met with Michelle and staff at the school and took a long look at it. But I'm excited about all the questions because they asked all of the same questions that you guys are asked and formulated their plan. When ASLC did their computations, it was without a plan or without any of that information. And so,
Okay, wait, what's ASLC?
yeah, that was the architectural firm that the school hired for information last fall. And
So that,
yes.
ALS.
Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, International Hill is the one that took that scope and did numbers on it. So I even brought.
ALC sat down with Michelle, identified the type of program they wanted to have. They have similar questions as what they said. They're both professional, reputable firms. We've asked them, have asked them, and they have met to reconcile their numbers. And they're gonna meet again in order to try to reconcile.
So when we're inviting the architects, are we inviting?
They have been invited for May 2nd,
They have been invited.
which is Wednesday.
And what their focus is at this time is to talk about the comparisons of a similar size school as far as cost. I think it would be good to be able to have the teachers and the principal identify programs. And then it would be good to have the two firms talk about costs. Both of them are very reputable firms that have constructed mills or remodeled.
Can they be told that it's not an opportunity for bidding war at that moment?
I think we put things in place so that they'll understand that, and our presentations will demonstrate that.
See, that's a 2-hour meeting.
At least.
Well, normally they don't compete that way. Architectural firms don't compete that way. That was the thing I was gonna try to say is that all these things that we were wanting them to hear next meeting, they've done that due diligence already, both of those firms. And whether or not it's exactly apples to apples, I think that was a good suggestion. My concern is that the question isn't just if you're looking at the same size building as the remodel or new construction. Even if the answer is, say, new construction, the community at large might not be in agreement with the cost to build everything that is in the program that we desire. And so then the next step is for us to determine how much of that program the community is willing to support and what we might have to do without. It's not just an apples-to-apples thing. I mean, that's one part of it, seeing if the remodel work or new construction. But then it's what is the community willing to buy? And that might not be everything we feel that the middle school should have.
So at that point, would that be where you would suggest using a survey, a community survey, saying, here's the programs that we want, which ones can you buy into, as well as, maybe.
Well, and I think there should be impacts looked at, like, for example, whether we put in tennis courts or not. You can look at monetary impacts of not having those tennis courts, and if we don't have those tennis courts, what is it going to cost us to have to rent tennis courts? It's just an example, maybe, but there may be larger costs for not including it in the construction of our facility by not doing it. And so we need to look at those comparisons as well, not just the first cost of how much it costs to build a building right now, but if we don't build something, if we don't build a theater large enough, how much is it
because there may be certain things they don't want to pay for, but there may be situations where they are interested in supporting more. I know it's a hard thing to believe in the current economy, but the fact is, if something's missing and it's deemed critical, it's worth at least exploring.
I think that's very important as far as the bond structure goes too, because the last bond structure was an at-will expenditure on the matching funds, where the bonds were going for the school, and now would people want to vote for either you or Modern, knowing where those matching funds are going to go, and I think that was important last.
And the concern that I heard at many different meetings was, we want to know what it's being spent on, specifically. And if we do our due diligence in terms of the programming aspect, I mean, that's the bigger sale, isn't it? It's not. I don't think that the sale of this particular project is based on what's the most cost effective. I think it's what's best for the students. And I understand that that makes it sound like I support the pie in the sky, ideal of all. No, it's quite the opposite. What I want is enough of everything so that our students get balance, so that they can be successful in whatever they choose to do, not what we've only allowed them to do. And that's the thing that I get concerned about. So I think the more that we can explore the possibility of, not getting stuck on worrying about how much we can afford, we'll get there. We'll get there. No doubt we'll get there. And the community will help us get there. No doubt about that. But I don't want us to be afraid to look at the possibilities of going beyond what we have, particularly in certain areas. I think it's possible.
So for point of process, then, do you want for your next meeting, if they're available, this is a change of date from what they asked, do you want to have a little presentation from Morgan Middle School after having received the information from Morgan Middle School next week? So that's the presentation, and then meeting following it, presentations from the two architects.
I think so.
Yeah.
And if that meeting is longer than 2 hours, are you okay with that? Because it's going to be content rich.
It is going to be very, who's bringing snacks? No. I mean, I'll be blunt, I'm worried about that. If I could to Michelle, I just want to get clarification that when you come with the information that you have, you will be discussing the current model of education provided in the facility at Morgan, as well as what you and the faculty would envision as an appropriate model of middle level education. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Both, yes, compared, yes.
Yes.
Provide what we currently have
And what we would like to provide, which may not necessarily be the same thing, and that does impact the facility design that we end up with. I am concerned about the fact that that presentation and this deliberation on it may exceed our 60 minutes. So I would suggest if there is another topic that we could consider as the backup agenda plan.
But the point is, she can come the following week if we want to continue
We
on.
continue.
Yeah, we don't have to. We're reading it ahead of time, and if you come queued with the things you need, I don't think you need to bring all the troops here. 2 or 3 are enough, I think, for a backup. She'll have the information
She will. We
she's
have,
getting,
okay.
right. And then if we want to end it at a particular time and go with the consultants, we can always come back to Michelle. She's right around the corner.
Maybe we can just agree that we'll be prepared enough as a group that she doesn't have to read the report to us.
Right.
And if we have questions as we're reading, we send them to her via email so she can be prepared.
Okay.
How would that work?
That would be great. Then my request for the architectural engineering firm presentations that come is that they be in this loop. As far as I'm concerned, from what I'm hearing and what my limited brain is grasping tonight, is that we want to have a sense of understanding of appropriate middle level model of education, which will drive our looking at the facilities model plan that we want to consider and get our minds around this recommendation to the community. Therefore, I would like the architect to be in the loop on understanding our current model of education and the envisioned model that the faculty has spent some time, I assume, envisioning what would be an appropriate way to educate our middle level kids, because that has a necessary impact on what our buildings look like. So is it possible for them to at least receive Michelle's report and just a polite request of would you mind taking a peek
Okay, but so we heard that they probably are aware of.
They're aware of all this,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but
Does it live in
I
America?
still think it's worthy of having them present for the entire conversation. I think it's very, because at some point we're going to turn to them and say, okay, what do you think? You know, what did you propose in the process in light of that?
In light of that, what's it gonna look
What
like?
did you do? I
Right.
mean, what did you propose to that?
So do we have their contact information in order to contact them? As far as, like,
I would also think that shortly after learning about the model that we have and the model that we would like to propose and hearing about the possible abilities and parts, then we do need to talk to the community, we would talk to the faculty. We also need to look at surveys of parents and taxpayers in general. And I don't know if anybody around this table has some survey experience, but we need somebody who knows what they're doing.
Need a contract or a contact?
Contact.
I think along that same line, the community's input should start, immediately. Yeah. That needs to be open and available because, we're going to have all the input, on one day. It's not going to work. So
What I envision is that information will be, from the surveys will be provided to this community. So that they can then look at that information and present those findings to the board.
But Brian, I think your question was, is there a way to have kind of continuous feedback loop to the committee?
right, rather than coming to the committee meetings and then receiving that input, so that because somebody has information that they want addressed, and let's say they send it in tomorrow, we don't hear about it until 2 weeks from now, and everybody receives a pack of this is what's been said to us 2 weeks from now. Well, then we have to read through it, and we can't address it for another 2 weeks. So we're looking at somebody's questions or concerns not being addressed for the entire month. So if it could be something that's a continuous feed of information to us.
I just feel we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I think we have to know, there's a spread of people here, and there's going to be some input to us. And we can talk to people if we want. That's a continuous input. But we've got to say, okay, this is what the educators say we need. And I think we have to bank on that and say, and then if there's something that's extremely expensive in there, it's going to pop out when we say, okay, this thing is going to cost X number of dollars. It's at that point, I think, we want to give feedback. I don't think we want to be tripped along the way. We've got to get a proposal ahead of us and agree ourselves and get that input. And then say, okay, this is what a modernization will cost, this is what a new building will cost, these will be the programs, and it'll be whatever it's going to be.
I don't know, similar mindset, but I think there's a compromise here in that I think we can start asking for information. The difficulty I have with just saying, okay, tell us what you think, is I'd rather us decide what the questions are first.
I think
That's all. So whether, I don't think it needs to wait very long. I think what we need to do is have this first meeting. And then part of that is let's decide what questions we need to ask the community based on this.
that's exactly what I'm getting. As soon as we have that sort of a more.
So after meeting with Michelle, then we can have that as our
I think it's
finale.
we all know, based on whatever conversations we've heard about this topic over the past however many years, is that if the public don't get a chance to have a say, we're doomed. Okay, before it even starts. So, and that's realistic and it's legitimate. And so as a result, I just, like I said, I'd rather than just say, tell us what you think. They don't have anything to go on. They're going to tell us what they thought, rather than what they think about what we're doing now. And I think what we need is feedback on what we're doing now. So the sooner the better. So let's be the ones to ask the questions.
We have to have visible information
document this committee has is available to the public?
Isn't that the same one that we have?
Is that the one you already have that? Do you already have that?
School district website, you can go and read every board minute agenda in 7 minutes, and that would.
No, I
I did
understand.
not
I'm just
find
talking about this.
the structural reports today when I looked. They're not there.
But are we going to use, I guess, I think we need to be thinking about that, but are we going to use the school district website?
Oh, I think that would be
Whatever.
fine as long as people can find it.
Can actually find what.
You know, like
Let me
advertising.
talk to Sean Mueller and see if he can set it up so that there's a very obvious what where all of this will be.
So, let me just check. Fritz had raised a question earlier about whether the committee wants to be doing work prior to the meeting in 2 weeks, other than reading the report from Morgan Middle School, and doing subcommittee work. My sense is that we'd like to have that information from Morgan Middle School, from the study, from the ALCI, prior to kind of determining what subcommittee structure you want, and then deciding at that meeting, it's a long meeting already, but deciding then or later whether there's work groups, or do you want to spend some more time tonight sorting out how you're going to be negotiating for various groups?
I think we should all reach out to you. Oh, just someone send us a link.
You go to OSPI,
And it's just
just Google OSPI on the first drop boxes, you'll find it, it's just called the handbook.
So I should actually do that tomorrow.
Oh, there's a whole document page.
Just Google OSPI and it'll be the first thing.
And it'll be there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay, okay, sorry. In answer to your question, my feeling is, and everybody correct me, but my sense is we just don't know enough yet in order to figure out our structure, that we have some input that we need, and the 3 sources you mentioned are appropriate. We need to hear from Michelle and the faculty. We need those 2 architectural firm reports. And it sounds like we're all going to be doing a vocal and homework between now and May 2nd to be prepared. After that point,
That could be one of our agenda items, is to form a committee structure.
The structural report should be on there as well, because the architectural reports refer to the structural reports, but they don't include them.
So when you say that should be on the,
Wherever that website is, that's the
on the
information.
school district, but you're not asking for a presentation on that?
No. I'm saying that, it's just, it would be good to the architectural reports reference structural reports, so those should be handy also.
So are people game then for waiting until at least next meeting before you're deciding on something?
We get the information, place to go, to find things like structural reports.
And the cost estimates, I know Phil had a cost estimate that you brought to one of the previous meetings as well. Any of that information would be great to have on there too.
Well, are those accurate to where you're at right now?
They were reconciling the cost estimates, both the study and ALSC have sat down and looked at the costs. And they still have another meeting. They agreed to disagree on some. But again, they're both reputable firms. And so they have changed.
Oh, okay.
will we get that?
At the next meeting, we will do that.
Then hopefully the information that can be posted will be current and accurate.
So they're already scheduled for May 2nd.
Yes.
So would be, I mean, I know I was going to ask for the Tuesday, but I can make arrangements for Wednesday night. It's easier just to keep that
It would
in
be
place.
great to keep that.
Michelle, is that the point? So.
Sorry.
Next meeting is going to stay on Wednesday.
I'll bring a razor for everybody.
So,
Are we going to get one another's contact information in case we would like to dialogue between now and then? So we can.
That's agreeable with everyone.
So let me just ask one other point. I've heard from a variety of different sections that not only is Morgan Middle School needs being asked to be considered, but there's consideration of would Morgan Middle School's auditorium be available and meet the needs of community theater or other community needs. And is that something you want to have be part of that consideration?
Next meeting?
Not next meeting, because I'm just saying, if the facility needs to be, then we'll school. Is that something that you as a committee want?
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry. So if we decide to build new and not use the not renovate, would we use the auditorium? Is that what you're asking?
For public needs other than the school district? And if so, would requirements, if they differ from the Morgan Middle School, be to
I
that
think we're
space?
going to have different parties of interest on that, so I don't know that this is necessarily the appropriate body to take that. But
Maybe
maybe
some
some
financial implications.
Right, the OSFI is the financial implication, and maybe while you're here, could you help us out? In the case that if a new school was chosen, could the school board take some of the matching funds, kind of a brainstorming, to seismically upgrade, seismically upgrade the auditorium with funds, and still be able to get matching funds for, because we've been led to believe that if we do anything with Morgan Middle School after the fact, we don't get any funds.
Well, the trick is that you're replacing Morgan Middle School as an educational facility. If it were transferred to community use, for civic theater, et cetera, it wouldn't be educational construction use. So, that.
What if it was used for educational purposes as well?
Then we've got to keep it on the records and it's no longer eligible for replacement. What you're talking about is replacing the building and taking the square footage. So if you're going to keep that portion as a part of instructional square footage, then that is not eligible for replacement now. It could be eligible for modernization now. But we're talking now how we're going to split novels up, and we're getting really complicated there. Like I said, if you wanted to divest yourself of the building and make it a community use, and I've seen that in a lot of places, when old school gets turned into a civic center or something like that, fine, that's still a non-instructional use. And the fact that you go into a place like that and maybe have your student play, extracurricular in there, fine, concert, fine, all extracurricular. You can't go in there and teach your music class.
And the school district would no longer own the building. That's what you're saying.
Well-
Ultimately, the school district cannot own.
There's interlocal agreements, there's a lot of different things that can be done that way. Which interlocal agreements basically, you're going to see your eyebrows. What do you got? An interlocal agreement is basically a partnership among government agencies, such as the city and the school district, the college and the school district, et cetera, et cetera.
It just wouldn't be an instructional space.
Correct, correct.
So next meeting then, May 2nd, 6:30 to 8:30, first presentation by the Morgan Middle School, and reflecting on the questions that you all have based on the research you've done. People also looking at chapter 2 of the document on the website, presentations by Cassetti and ALSC, and then potentially looking at structure, subcommittee structure. So it's now 8:37, there's been a couple of hands up in the audience.
I'd recommend, or like to see the committee tour Morgan together, if possible, before the next meeting of the staff, talking about the programs they offer, the climate, the setting at the school. If you have any, just throw that out there.
Shall we have the next meeting at Morgan and begin with the tour?
You guys did it at 6:30, I don't think, we still have time to.
Well, if we did the tour at 6 for those who want it, and go from there.
Let's
Is
do
that
it.
okay? Then we get it started at 6:30.
Meeting here at 6:30.
No, I say you were there.
In the cafeteria?
The library.
For the library?
Michelle, is that possible?
6
For-
o'clock.
If we meet at 6 for a tour and have a meeting there at Morgan at 6:30, is there space for that?
We'll make sure it's there.
Is the entire committee open to sharing your contact email
With the technology.
Hey, did you see the 100? Yeah.